Kansas Senator Jerry Moran joins us now. Moran was part of a congressional delegation to Russia earlier this month. Thank you for your time this morning, sir. What is your reaction to the president's meeting with Putin and the presser that followed?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased that just as our trip to Russia, I think, was of value, I'm pleased that the two presidents of Russia and the United States sat down and had a conversation. But I do think there was a missed opportunity, an opportunity for President Trump to outline our country's strong support for NATO and that alliance, and an opportunity to insist on different behavior from Russia in regard to election meddling, but also Ukraine and Syria. And maybe those conversations took place in the private conversation, but I start with the premise that Russia is an adversary, and I start with the premise that we need to make certain.
Do you not think that the president believes the same thing?
I think the president surely believes that Russia is an adversary. He's used different words in that regard, but we face a tremendous challenge. I think President Putin is always going to be pushing back on the Western alliance, upon democracy, upon the United States, and I want us to be firm in our resolve with our allies from Europe and around the world that we're not going to tolerate bad behavior by Russia.
Because when we hear criticism, as we are this morning, on the left and from many on the right as well, within your own party, Senator, isn't it important to be specific on what your criticism is? Is it of the intent of this president, or is it the strategy that he's using with Russia?
No, I would never debate the intent of President Trump. I know he loves our country and cares about it. My point is one of a missed opportunity in which standing firm with our allies, making certain that Russia understands that the U.S. and Europe are united in opposition to expansion of support of the sovereignty of the borders of those countries that surround Russia, and particularly making certain that the idea of election meddling in the United States and European countries is something not to be tolerated, cannot be tolerated in 2018 or 2020. And it very well may be that the president delivered that message. We won't know what happened necessarily unless the two parties release that information. But those things could have been said, just not in that public setting.
And that is an important point. Many in your party are making that this morning, that we don't know what happened behind the closed doors. The closed door meeting between these two leaders, it did last longer than expected. And then when they got together with their national security teams, it was shorter than expected. So a lot could have happened behind those closed doors, Senator.
It could have. I had hoped that there'd be other individuals, Americans, surrounding the president in that meeting. My experience in my trip to Moscow is that the Russians are propagandists. They certainly described the meetings that me and my colleagues had with Russian officials in a way that was totally different than the way it actually transpired. So it would be nice to have others in the room making certain that the words that may come out of Putin and the Russian media are accurately describe the conversations that took place between the two leaders.
Senator John Barrasso, your colleague, was on with us this morning, and he seemed to very firmly take the side of the president after all this. Watch.
Well, Vladimir Putin is not our friend. He is an adversary. He has proven that through his actions. He has said that his goal is to restore the former Soviet Union. We know that he has meddled in the United States elections. There's a lot to be said about the bad things that Putin has done, and I think there's a lot to be said about the strong things that President Trump has done with arming Ukraine, with the sanctions against Russia.
So while you are, Senator, being clear, and sorry for cutting you off there, I was throwing to that soundbite, you are being clear that you think the president could have handled himself differently in this meeting and that press conference yesterday. Is it fair to say that this president has been tough and tougher than his predecessors on Russia?
Well, it's fair to say that the United States and President Trump have been tough on Russia. The actions, the sanctions that are in place, the president didn't walk away from those sanctions in the conversations with President Putin. Those are things that, in my view, need to be maintained and strengthened. And the steps that we've taken to demonstrate that to Russia over a period of time have been clear. So it is an opportunity for us to do more, but we've done this well to this point in regard to keeping the sanctions in place.
Well, the president's been tweeting this morning, and he tweeted out in response to your colleague Rand Paul in the Senate. Rand Paul seemed to defend the president in yesterday's move with Vladimir Putin, and the president tweeted to Rand Paul, "Thank you. You really get it. The president has gone through a year and a half of totally partisan investigations. What's he supposed to think?" Obviously, he was responding to the words of Rand Paul there. Does the president this morning need to say anything, Senator, noting your criticism of this summit with Putin? Does the president, the White House, which they have been fairly quiet this morning, do they need to say anything, clarify anything, defend anything? What do you want to hear from the White House this morning?
No, I wouldn't give any advice to the White House this morning on what needs to be said. Only the president and perhaps his top advisors know what transpired behind closed doors. I just would make the point is that I would make this point to Putin and to Russia today is the U.S. and Europe are united behind NATO. That election meddling did occur, and it needs to stop. We need your help in resolving the differences in Syria. There are things we can work on together, but it's going to take a change in behavior, Russian behavior, for those for us to get a closer working relationship and for Congress to lift the sanctions. That'd be my message.
Senator
and it would
Moran,
be to be the Russian to Putin, not to the President Trump.
Great to have you on to react to all that this morning. Good to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.